Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name's Mike. I'm coming from Oslo today to talk to you about DevOps, and I'm a CTO for a company that specializes in helping companies with DevOps. And it's a lot of fun. It's really interesting. I learn a lot by doing it. But over the last few years, I've started to see, shall we say, an interesting pattern appear over and over again in large organizations who want to do what they call a digital transformation. Has anyone worked in a company that's gone through a digital transformation before? Okay, excellent. So for the rest of you, I'm sure you will at some point, and hopefully this will be useful to you. So, yes. So my idea is to explain this pattern that I've seen over and over again. I'm going to start on a pretty solid foundation. I'm going to say, I want to prove to you that actually modern Agile is rubbish. I've seen it over and over again, organizations going through this digital transformation. They start by adopting some kind of organizational change around Agile, and it just doesn't work. So after you've adopted this modern Agile, you tend to get yourself in a trap, and that's why I think we're also pretty doomed when we go down this path as well. So I want to talk to you about the Agile alignment trap and why it is such a trap. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how to save yourself once you're in this trap. A little bit of DevOps, but actually just about technical excellence and getting good at delivery. Excellent. So modern Agile is rubbish. I guess we've all seen this before. This is the Agile Manifesto. How many of you are working in an Agile team? Okay, how many of you are not working in an Agile team? Okay, but that's great. The Agile Manifesto it changed everything for us in the industry. It's been, 17, 18 years since it came out. Just these 4 simple values came through and changed the way we deliver software. It wasn't a lot, these 4 values. A little bit later, they came with more principles and so on and all kinds of things. But this is a bunch of people that had spent years arguing about the best way to make software, finally figured out they had something in common. And this is what they came up with. So the idea is that we'll adopt Agile, we're going to all stand together, hold hand in hand, and we're going to live and sing in harmony. We're going to make software in harmony. This is the goal. So, the simple way to get started with Agile is actually just to start with Agile. Break down your work into small pieces of small tasks, small items to do, and talk to your team and work together as a team to deliver what the customer needs in small increments. And you start by maybe putting something up on the wall. Now we're software engineers, so we realize that maybe we can do better than this. Maybe there's a better process than just getting around a wall every day and putting some stickers. What about if we made some software for this? Wouldn't that be an improvement? That's an open question. But at least, we don't have to necessarily get around a board every day. We could work remotely. We could work from home. We could have a remote team. We could have teams in different countries working together now. We don't actually have to maybe talk so much. We could put things in Jira tickets instead. Okay. And this worked. This was how Agile was implemented. I'd say for most of the companies I see using Agile, it's not always Jira. It could be another system. But they generally end up going to some kind of digital format just because of its utility. It's so useful to be able to check in the evenings. It's so useful to be able to be distributed. And, eventually these systems can become quite hairy. It's not that much longer. You think, well, okay, maybe just organizing the team around a Jira board isn't enough. Maybe we need some kind of governance around the program. But it's okay, we can scale Agile. We've got this fantastic thing called SAFe. Has anyone come across SAFe before? Is anyone using SAFe at the moment? Okay, well, this talk is for you. So, the idea is that, okay, the teams independently working in iterations, that's great, but we need to do some more planning. We need to think beyond the sprint. We need to, put some governance around the program. We need a role for the business owners. We need some kind of process around how we're going to deal with non-functional requirements. And you can see there's a little bit of DevOps as a bullet point list in the corner. Not really sure how that works. But sometimes you think, well, maybe a program management isn't enough. Actually, we're a big enterprise. We need some portfolio management. We need to manage the program. We need to manage the portfolio. We need to have some overarching governance on this. So, okay, we're going to have enterprise architects and epic owners and start to think about the budgets and the backlogs and, put all this into some structure. Maybe you don't have a portfolio, but maybe you're building a really big project. Maybe you're working on the next version of Windows. That's okay. SAFe has got you covered there too. This is called a large solution. It's kind of the same. We just need some extra governance on top of the program because there has to be a role for management in this picture. Maybe this isn't enough for you either. Maybe you want some portfolio governance on a large solution. That's okay. SAFe's got you covered there too. So you can have a portfolio management on top of the large solution, on top of the program, and down here somewhere in this picture, there are actual people delivering software, I hope. But that's a long, long way from the 4 values of the Agile Manifesto, I think you'll agree. This is what's called full SAFe. This is the actual term for it, full SAFe. And it's basically an off-the-shelf, do-it-yourself Agile transformation. It's terrifying. Terrifying to me, at least, that this is considered to be a way to get Agile. Kind of escalated pretty quickly from these 4 simple principles, right? So we're kind of, in that whole picture, we kind of lost the thrust of what we were trying to solve with Agile. And that was about being responsive to change and getting close to the customer. This following a plan thing was supposed to be lower down in the priorities. This looks a lot like following a plan, building and managing plans. It's like deja vu all over again. We do this over and over and over again in software. Has anyone heard of this paper, Managing the Development of Large Software Systems? It was from 1970, Dr. Winston Royce. It's actually a hugely influential paper in software engineering, and most people have never read it. It was the paper that actually first described the waterfall software development process. The idea that you do requirements and then analysis and design, and then finally you get to some coding, and then you test the system, and then you send it over to run in production. This was how you made a software project. It was just like building a bridge. It was a long analysis phase, a design phase, a construction phase, and then you use this software. This is waterfall software development. Now, in this paper, Winston Royce says, this implementation described above is risky and invites failure. But guess what? Everyone still did it anyway because they remembered the picture, but they didn't read the text. They just copied what they saw. And this ended up going through into many different standards. This was the DoD standard 21678. So this was basically the software development process that was defined for all Department of Defense contracts. And they basically said, follow the waterfall method. When I was a student at university, we learned SSADM. Did anyone else learn SSADM as a student or use it in production? This was basically the waterfall model defined as a software methodology. So it's the idea of doing logical design and then physical design and then coding and then testing and then so on. So this whole idea ended up becoming the way we made software, even though it was exactly the opposite of what was actually originally described by the leaders in the field. And it's exactly the same with Agile. We're saying, responding to change over following a pattern. And then 15 years later, we end up with safe. Like, we keep doing this. This is why we can't have nice things. Anytime someone describes something that's either very good or something that's very bad, it's only a matter of time before we do exactly the opposite and call it the same thing. It's the same is true for Agile, the same is true for DevOps, same is true for Waterfall, all this stuff. We just keep not reading, basically. And there's a good reason for it. The first thing is that a lot of us would really rather not think, rather than come up with our own solutions to problems. It's a lot easier just to copy what other people are doing, because it's a best practice. What is the best practice in the field? Well, that's kind of a dog whistle for me. If someone's asking me what the best practice is, it's usually a clue that they don't want to think, because you want someone else's solution to your problems, and you need to figure out your own solutions to your problems. It's like Homer Simpson when he was running for mayor. He's like, can't someone else do it? Isn't it easier if someone else can just solve our problems and we can copy it? But that's not how software works. We're working in a very, very complex world. So, I mean, there's this great cartoon from Bonkers World about organizational charts where, you know, this started to look at, like, it's a comedy, but you say Amazon's very, very steep hierarchy. You've got Google, which is basically a graph of everybody's reporting to everyone. You've got Facebook, which is a social graph. You've got Microsoft, where it's got different tribes at war with each other. Apple, where everybody ends up reporting to Steve Jobs. And then Oracle, where it's nearly all legal. So, I mean, it's fun. We see these different cultures, and we can extrapolate from them. But we don't think about these kind of companies and think, you know, we should just copy what they do, because they don't have something that's very easy to copy. It's just the way they are. However, we will copy something else that seems cool and hip at the time. Scaling Agile at Spotify. This was a paper from 7 years or so ago. Henrik Nieberg and Anders Iversen, they're talking about the way they implemented Agile in Spotify. And it's talking about, this is where the idea of squads and guilds and tribes, basically how to deal with a big team. Like, how do you get beyond a team when it's with Agile? Now, this solution is how they solved it in Spotify. In the paper, they say, don't copy it. This is where we ended up because we did a lot of experimentation, tests, tried things, failed. This is where we ended up. How many of you work in an organization with tribes? It's non-zero. How many with squads? Again, non-zero. I've seen about 8 companies last year who all said, oh, we're following the Spotify model. In the paper, they say don't do this, and yet we still end up doing this. It's a cargo cult. We just want to copy because we can't think for ourselves. So we end up copying all the things, except we just do it badly. So our copy is just like this, where native tribes in the Pacific thought that all the cargo came in on the airplanes. So if we make pretend airplanes, then the cargo will come back. We're doing exactly the same thing. This is rubbish, in case I haven't made my point clear so far. This is rubbish. Modern life is rubbish, Blur is rubbish, and modern Agile is rubbish. It's all rubbish. Okay, are we sufficiently motivated now? Great. Okay, so now on to the uplifting part of the talk. We're all doomed. Yes. I would like for you to please take out a mobile device, a computer, a laptop, or anything that has a browser, because we're going to do a quick audience participation. And I would very much like you to go to this website. Excuse me. Yeah, if you go to menti.com, and if you type in this code, 509233, I'd very much appreciate it. Now, I've got a question for you when you get there. So, if you think about the best team experience that you've ever had, be it as whatever your role was that team, it doesn't matter, but the best team you ever worked in. And then also think about the worst team you've ever worked in. I want you to think about both of those teams and give them a kind of a context. I want you to think in terms of effectiveness, how good that team was at getting things done. And I want you to think about alignment, how aligned that team was with the business. So if you score your best team and your worst team, wow, that's great. That's excellent. It's very interesting. So what do we see here? So the two dots that we have are basically the average of all your scores. So we can see that in general, the worst teams you worked on weren't very effective, but they were quite aligned, more or less the same amount aligned with the business as the best teams. The difference about the best teams and the worst teams, at least how you experienced them, was to do with how effective they were. This is a very common result. Now, we can have a look at it, and we see that, there's still a big spread, right? You shouldn't take this average to mean too much. I'm not sure the predictive power of it. But what is interesting is to do this. You can do this experiment in your own organization. And that's even more fun. So there's quite a big spread. Whoever was on this team, I feel real bad for you. That was a rough project. And then we see, yeah, the spread on the best teams is very interesting. Isn't that interesting? It's all on the right side. How do you like that? So what does this tell us?
Is it the same guy?
Yeah, somebody's really been unlucky. He went from here to here. I'm assuming to him. But it's also possible for women to have bad experiences on teams. I don't. So, but this is actually quite a common result. And I'm going to explain why. Thank you. So, the reason I asked you those questions is because, alignment. We'll come back to that. Actually, no. First, we'll describe this. What is it that SAFe and all these scaled Agile frameworks are trying to solve? Are they trying to make teams more effective, or trying to make teams more aligned with the business? They're trying to make teams more aligned with the business. They're all about alignment. So everything's about, are we doing the right thing? Yeah, sure, there's some sprinkled bullet points about doing some DevOps and like maybe something about doing some non-functional requirements. But really, they're about, are we doing the right thing? It's all about alignment. Now, the interesting thing is that there's been research done. This is from 2007 by, I think it was mostly consultants from Bain Consulting Company. And they did a study. They surveyed over 500 executives in like Fortune 500 companies, or actually S&P 500 companies, and asked them those questions. How aligned do you think your IT department is with your business needs? And how effective do you think they are? And they got some very, very interesting results. The goal was that they wanted to just get a survey of the industry, how things were going. But what they found is that the path to IT-enabled growth, which is basically how does IT make your company grow faster? Well, the most important thing is the first move. So Again, it's the same thing, the effectiveness and the alignment. So if you break it down, what they actually found, this was in 2007, I guess it would be fascinating to do this research again today, but I'm not sure much has changed in our industry. What they found was 74% of those executives thought that their companies were in the maintenance zone. Basically, not very effective and not highly aligned to what the business needed. This is the maintenance zone. This is basically spending money to keep the lights on. Most executives thought that their IT organization was in this category. Now, if you go along to the right, 8% were in this category called well-oiled IT, where the IT organization is not extremely aligned to the business needs, but they're actually quite good at getting stuff done. Now, the interesting thing about this is, here, it's saying, well, the good news is, if you're in this category, most likely you're spending 15% less on IT. And your financial performance, according to 3-year growth, that's how they were measuring financial performance, your growth is going to be quite good as well. Your financial performance is going to be good, and your IT costs are going to be cheaper. So in general, being good and not listening to the business is actually not a bad place to be for an IT organization. Now, up and to the right is where you want to be with any magic quadrant diagram. That's how it works in business school. So about 7% of the companies were in this group, and they were still spending 6% less than average, and they were getting 35% more growth than average in terms of their sales. So obviously being up and to the right was fantastic for the business, which is no surprise, right? The interesting thing about that is, I'll talk a little bit more about DevOps later, but this is exactly the same finding that has been found from the State of DevOps report and all the research that Dora has done into how delivery affects your financial outcomes of a business. There's a strong predictive power of IT performance to financial returns for a company. So that's fantastic. Now, the reason why the paper is called the alignment trap is because this is the most interesting part of the diagram, is when you're highly aligned, like you listen a lot to the business, you do everything the business asks you as an IT organization, but you're not very good. What they found is that in this stage, you're going to spend 13% more than average on IT. So it's going to be more expensive if you listen than if you don't listen. And most likely your financial results are going to be poor. So the reason why it's called the alignment trap is, how easy do you think it is to improve as an IT organization if you do only what the business tells you? Probably not so easy, right? If you are close to your customer, who's close to the market, who's saying, we need this feature, we need this for the customer, we need to solve this problem, how much time are they going to spend to get off the mainframe, to pay down some of this legacy code, get rid of some of this technical debt, to do some refactoring? It doesn't happen. If your only focus is on alignment, then it's really hard to get out of there, because the people in charge are the business. Now, the reason why I say that this is a big problem, and I'm seeing it more and more again, is that many, many companies are facing what's called digitalization challenges now. Traditional organizations like banks, insurance companies, automotive companies, they're all starting to feel a lot of competitive pressure from those companies that are digitally native. It's a huge amount of competitive pressure, so they're all going through this digital transformation. And the very first step they do is to go agile. They reorg, so they get the business and the QA and the tests all mashed together and make sure the POs are close to the market. That's great, except it's going to take you directly up. Now, if you're not very effective, you're going to get stuck there, because as soon as you've reorganized and had a culture shift so that the IT organization is listening to the business needs, it's very, very hard to get good. So what they found is the companies that did manage to get out of there they went down first and to the right before going up. So it looks a bit like this. You can't go from the top left to the top right. It's impossible. A lot of companies solve this problem because they know this. They don't have the words for it, but they know this. Now, if we want to get off the mainframe and into the cloud, then what we need to do is create a team. We're going to make a department. We're going to put them in the basement. They're going to be the cloud platform team, and they're going to work for a year and a half, making sure it's secure and giving a platform for all our teams to get to the cloud. And then we'll start bringing over the services to the cloud. And that's just another fancy way of saying we're going to stop listening for a while. We're going to build a team and stop listening, go into another corner, and get some work done so that we can have a future. And that's what you need to know. So this paper is really the main reason why I'm here today. I just want everybody to understand that this paper exists. The alignment trap is a thing, and there's a way out of it, but it's not the way you would think. The way I describe it often is thinking in terms of a boat. I spent many years on marine seismic acquisition systems. So imagine a boat. You have a rudder and you have an engine. The rudder is all about setting the direction. This is alignment. The engine is about getting you somewhere. Now, if you only focus on getting a bigger rudder, you can steer as hard as you like. You're going nowhere. You need an engine. So you need to make sure that you're building the engine if you're going to apply any rudder. There's no point in using a rudder if you're not going anywhere. So yes, aligning a poorly performing IT organization to the right business objectives still won't get those objectives accomplished. It's just not going to happen. And you can see that in contrast to Agile, right? So we're all doomed, but there's a way out. We're going to get out of this alignment trap. We're going to save ourselves with DevOps and actually just building an engine. How many have heard of the State of DevOps report? Right, for the rest of you, you should go and check it out because it's free. You can download it. I think you have to give your email address or something. I'm sure you can find it on Google. But it's really interesting. It's been run by the DORA organization since 2013, I think. So there's many, many years of data gathered now. And what they do is they do a survey of IT practitioners every year, an online survey where you fill out the report, and they use that to infer things about the state of our industry. The important thing is that they ask good questions. They ask questions that have a predictive power, that they can form good relationships. The research is published in this State of DevOps report. It's also often a lot of the research is published in independent peer-reviewed journals. And there's a really good book now called Accelerate by Nicole Forsgren and her team, talking more about the research methods they use. So I really recommend that. Well, what they found was that there's a big difference in IT performance across organizations. I guess just from that survey we did in this room a few minutes ago, we saw that there's a big difference between the best teams and the worst teams. Of course, we all know that, but there's other data to back that up. There is a huge distribution of IT performance in the industry. Now, this is from the 2017 State of DevOps report. And for me, this is one of the best pieces of research that came out of all the work that DORA have done. Because what they do is they look at the predictive power of different practices on IT performance. What they're what they're able to do is not just talk about correlations, but predictive powers. So establish a cause and effect. So one of the things that they've been able to do is say, IT performance is predictive of organizational performance, basically finances. If you're good at IT, which means you're good at lean product management and continuous delivery, then you'll tend to make more money. That's what the data shows from the surveys. How do you get IT performance? Well, there's two aspects. And it's interesting, because these two aspects look very much like the two axes on the alignment trap, right? There's one about lean product management. Are we doing the right thing? Are we making the things that the customer wants? And the other thing is about continuous delivery. So you're kind of balancing that, right? The alignment and the effectiveness. But what they found is that they're both predictive. Obviously, continuous delivery and so on requires some practices, like trunk-based development and so on. Another part of their research that they found that very interesting is that none of that stuff happens unless the leadership is on board. Because guess what? If the leadership isn't on board, if they're not driving the change, who's going to give the sponsorship to break down the architecture, to empower the teams, to do continuous integration, to write the automated tests? All of these things that drive continuous delivery require investment. The investment will never happen unless the leadership's on board. Super interesting. Yeah, so this is the version of the slide I show management because it's a lot simpler. Finances come from alignment and effectiveness. You need practices and tools, and you need to lead it, otherwise it's not going to happen. It's that simple. But now we have data to prove that. So, where does that leave us? Maybe we want to sprinkle some DevOps on our safe. It's okay. Safe's got us covered. We've got Safe DevOps. You can become a certified Safe for DevOps practitioner. How does that sound? Pretty good, huh? Let's do that. And you start to dig into it. I mean, it's not nonsense. They're saying all the right words and in all the right places. You should do these things. But is getting a certification going to help you do these things? It's not. It doesn't happen. Certification is not going to solve your problems. You need to actually get good. Yeah. There's also a radar you can use if you want to know how DevOpsy you are and you're safe. But again, we're solving the wrong problem. We want to solve the problem by copying what's in the Safe DevOps handbook. That doesn't make sense. We're just copying again and again. We need to stop this. Okay. Next up, I would very much like you to get your phones out again. And if you would be so kind, go to menti.com and use code 2883. Is that right? That doesn't sound like there's enough numbers. It works? What do you know? I thought it was always 6 numbers. Yes. So I want you to think about your company culture and answer these questions according to whether you strongly agree or strongly disagree with the statement in terms of your own culture.
Question about failure causes inquiries. Is that inquiries as to why the failure happened, or is it a punishment as to?
Yeah, it's more about it's a chance to learn, whether a failure is seen as a chance to learn. Interesting. So this is a fun thing to do in a company, because you would think in a company everyone would have the same view of the culture, but that's not how it works. You can do this. It's 7 questions. You can make a simple Google form or something in your own organization. You get a quick temperature on the culture. What's interesting, of course, is that this is a conference. So by definition, you're all probably in companies that are willing to spend some money for you to go and learn something. So you're already not a representative sample of our industry. But you can see that even amongst this representative sample, there are quite a few answers low down on this chart. There is a distribution of culture. Now, the reason why I asked you these 7 questions is because these 7 questions help us to categorize an organization's culture in terms of its Westrom culture. So Westrom was an organizational psychologist, and he categorizes these organizations into 3 broad categories. There's the pathological or power-oriented cultures, where there's low cooperation, messengers are shot, responsibilities are shirked, bridging is discouraged, like going between different parts of the organization, failure leads to scapegoating, and novelty is crushed. And then there's the bureaucratic or rule-oriented organizations, where basically everybody wants to follow the system. There's not a lot of flexibility. There's some cooperation as much as you really need, but no more. And, changes to the system lead to problems. In the bureaucracy, when you try and change something, there's always a challenge to the existing regime. So it's really a rule-oriented organization. And then on the third type is the generative or performance-oriented organization, where the most important thing is how good can we be? Where there's a culture of high cooperation. You want to train messengers. You want to make sure people find it easy and safe to give feedback. You share the risks. You share the rewards. You try and speak to whoever you need to speak to get something done. So the research that the DORA team have done in the State of DevOps report, and there are other research, is to show that actually the culture an organization has really matters in terms of its IT performance. This is from the book Accelerate. And what they found is that, yes, this software delivery performance, what I was showing you was the lean product management and the continuous delivery. They're wrapped up in this software delivery compound construct. But 2 other things really impact your organizational performance. One is your organizational culture. So your culture affects your performance. If you have a generative culture, you're more likely to make more money. If you have a bureaucratic culture, less so. If you have a pathological one, even less so. Now, what they found also is that, remember earlier, continuous delivery affected performance? Continuous delivery in DevOps, like all those practices, also affects your culture. So the less manual work you do, the more automation, the more cross-functional your teams become, the better your culture becomes. So what they say is that investments in technology can also be investments in people. And you can improve your culture by improving your technology practices, which I've seen time and time again, and I'm sure you have in your career also. Does anyone know who this man is? This is Alistair Coburn. He was one of the signatories of the Agile Manifesto. He was very influential, well, still is, I suppose, but he was one of the founding giants of the Agile movement. He had a fantastic paper called Characterizing People as Nonlinear First-Order Components in Software Development. It's not very catchy. And it's also not online anymore, which is very disappointing. But there is good news, because we have a fantastic thing called the Wayback Machine. So I was able to find it and dig it up for you. So this is what it looks like. I think it was actually published in the ACM as well, so you can find it online if you have a dig for it. But what he's talking about is his understanding as, he was into software process. He was a software methodology researcher, essentially. That was his thing, that was his bag. He was mostly interested in how to get people to work together to make software. And obviously that's why he had a big role to play in the Agile Manifesto. What he realized, the reason why the title includes the term components is because most software methodology looks at people, thinks about people as basically interchangeable Lego blocks, as components. And this is what he's saying is that what he's found in all of his work is that this approach is a big mistake because people are so different and nonlinear, highly variable. So to treat anything, any system of people as just interchangeable cogs, it will never work. Now, if we look at SAFe, it seems like there's a lot of components in this system. They don't look like people at all. This is a very dehumanizing way to think about people. What he also said was that there's some problems. The first problem is that as a software methodology researcher, he would go into organizations and try and get them to use a new methodology. And he found that actually people didn't care. Like, even if he's brought in and paid, most people just didn't care. They didn't want to try his new methodology. Why would they? Why is it interesting? So they're not interested in learning the system. And the second problem from his research was that they were able to ignore us and continue to deliver software anyway. What he says is almost any methodology can be made to work on some project. We had a huge amount of software made between 1968 and 1998. It was following Agile, following waterfall principles. We made software. There were successful teams in those contexts. Just like there's unsuccessful teams working in Agile. Maybe the methodology isn't as important as we think it is. Any methodology can be used to fail on some project. You know, there'll be somewhere that even the best method will fail. Heavy processes can be successful. I'm sure we'll see successful companies using SAFe. That I don't dispute. But what he says is light processes are more often successful. And this was published in 1999, a couple of years before the Agile Manifesto, but this idea of lightweight processes and putting people central, this is where it's all coming from. So in front of us all this time, we weren't seeing it. It's the people. The people are the most important thing in the whole system. And pretending otherwise is silly. They're the most important aspect of whether you're going to succeed in your software delivery or not. So in a related topic, the Defense Innovation Board, it's part of we saw earlier, the Defense Department had their Agile, their waterfall approach to software delivery, at least for contractors. They've started to think differently now. So this is a paper called Detecting Agile BS. It's a great paper. Came out just a few months ago. And in it has this table. It's like, okay, the most important thing is competence trumps process. It's the same thing, right? We're learning it over and over again. There's a pattern here. The most important thing is that we're good. We're good at what we do. We're able to deliver. The process isn't important. So why are we spending all our time thinking about the process instead of getting good? It's not a smart way to invest our time. And in the paper, they have this it's maybe a little bit hard to read, but I can just say, like, the most important thing is there's kind of a good way to do Agile and a not so good way to do Agile, what they call Agile BS. And it's really easy to fall into a trap of Agile BS. Are you talking to real users? Are there some clear goals for the software? Are we getting feedback and using that feedback to actually decide what to work on next? Is the full ecosystem of the project Agile? It's not just we're doing Agile and then releasing every 6 months. Are we really doing the full end-to-end Agile? Is the team empowered? Can they change their process? Do they have the freedom to change their own process? Can they decide how they work? If the answer to any of those questions is no, then it's Agile BS, according to them. And I have to agree. They also have another article called The 10 Commandments of Software, which came out earlier than this, but it's still very interesting. So if you want to read that, there's a lot of smart thoughts in these papers. But again, we've known this all along. The most important thing is that people are motivated. If people are motivated, then guess what? They will do great work. People are the most important aspect of the software development process. We know a little bit about what motivates people. Mastery, of course. We want to be good at what we do. Purpose is important. We want to do something that has a purpose in our lives. We also need autonomy. We need the space to be able to decide how we work, why we work. There's not a lot of autonomy in these systems. Last year, Martin Fowler did a great talk on basically looking back at 10, 15 years of Agile process since Agile came around. And what he kind of highlighted two main problems with where Agile went compared to what they had as the original founding goals. The first is that this idea of like this Agile industrial complex, basically these certification bodies, these certification systems, this idea of, you know, there's a right way and you just have to follow our template, this copy and paste approach is an absolute travesty. This is what he found. And the second problem is the lack of importance of technical excellence. And really, that's the key thing. You need motivated people who are technically excellent, and that's the place to focus. If you want to improve the way you deliver software, forget about your process. Only focus on the technical excellence, and you'll get much further. The World Economic Forum says that by 2022, in 3 years from now, everybody in our economy will need 101 days of learning in order to be useful in the new digital economy. That's a lot of learning. But it has to happen. We need to invest a huge amount of work. This is just for ordinary workers. For us working in tech, I think that that's an underestimate. And when you see companies that say, you can go for a conference once a year, that's your training budget, it's really not enough. If we want to focus that technical excellence is the key to getting anywhere in our organization, then we need to invest in our people. That's the place to spend the money. So this is it. We thought Agile would bring us all this happy, singing people, holding hands, delivering software together. That was the goal. But we ended up torturized souls begging for death because we tried to solve it by the cookie cutter. And we have to get beyond that in our industry. So I hope we can do that. I think we can. The most important thing is that we keep investing in our skills, work together and focus on delivery, and know about the alignment trap. So I hope that that's a good message for you. The two most important takeaways that I want you to have from this is, one, go and read the alignment trap paper. It's still very, very important, and we have a lot to learn from it even today. And the second thing is, look at the DevOps research, and there's actual hard data about what gives you financial outcomes in your organization. So with that, I'll say thank you and enjoy the rest of the conference.